Julie, let's talk about competency and acquisition, language acquisition, because I feel like this is just something that I had a lot of assumptions about, and it wasn't until I was really introduced to a lot of these concepts about, what kinds of competencies that are out there that I realized, whoa, being fluent in a language is not necessarily what I think it is.
Yeah, it's complicated, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, back to my first impression of you, obviously I was very amazed that you could speak 4 different languages, but I now realize that that's also, a journey, and there's a history there that you've been on with being able to learn those languages as well. So can we unpack a bit about your journey?
Yes, I think that would be really great. And I just want to say that it's a bit artificial to try to map out one's competence of any sort in a bar graph or grid or even the language portraits. I mean, that's cool, but marking out the colors in a certain way in your body, there's something about that too that doesn't feel quite right. And the other thing about competence, I think also is you tell me, I can map something out for you roughly now, but a year later could really change. And so what do you think? What are the reasons why something could change in terms of somebody's competence?
So many things. I mean, it's not just one thing. I think for me, I've really felt that when I have moved out of home.
That's right. Okay, so when you're moving and you change context, right? That's a huge dimension in which your linguistic knowledge in a certain language can change. Because when you move, and this happens all the time with with some of the families that I work with, if their grandparents move away or you move away from your grandparents, then that link where you had the opportunity to hear a lot or talk to them in a particular language is gone. And it's true that you can have FaceTime and still talk, but it's not the same. And actually what I see young kids doing as they're growing up in a dominant, where English is a dominant language, is they're hiding when their grandparents are on the phone because they're embarrassed to, show them that they're, let's just say Vietnamese or Korean or whatever is not great. I mean, there are so many TikTok videos out on that. That's because that is such a big thing. So it's all going to be a bit artificial. It's not going to be just right. But still, for the sake of getting into the conversation, the visual can still be helpful. And what I found in doing mine, I wanted to do this because I wanted to talk about that complexity of communicative competence. And communicative competence doesn't just mean language. That's just what you said. There's so much more involved to that. So I decided to just kind of map out mine. And obviously, every single person is going to be different. And then we'll have a look at yours. But okay, so it's complicated. So let's just start having a look. So one thing that actually really surprised me was my grammatical competence, because I think that my grammatical competence is really the worst out of everything in all languages. And I was surprised in doing the bars that actually I know a lot more of the grammar of this language or that language because I've studied it formally in schools. Okay, so that's huge, isn't it? I've been speaking Korean all my life, but I don't have any grammatical competence because I haven't studied it. And then when I learned Japanese and learned the grammar, that's how I learned Korean, because when I learned Japanese, it was very difficult to study with an English textbook because the way that the sentence structures and everything it's just complicated. So much easier. I asked my mom to send me a textbook from Korea of Korean kids learning Japanese in Korea. And when I used that, I could understand everything beautifully. It just all made sense to me. And if I could just activate my Korean brain to learn Japanese, I learned it in 6 months. It was so easy, so easy. And the same thing happened to me for English and Chinese. That was actually very helpful. Very difficult to learn Chinese from from Korean grammar structures. So this is 100% why I say, first of all, the first language can, or the second language, and we don't have to count it, but whatever linguistic knowledge you have to activate can be a resource for learning another language. And also, if you've learned the language to the extent where I have learned it, like I went to Chinese high school in China, and I lived there for 7 years. I lived in Japan for 7 years and learned Japanese formally. And I was in a working context where I was using business Japanese. So if you've learned it that much, you must have clearly learned how to learn languages. So you are skilled. It's not about like, oh, I have to activate my Korean to learn my Japanese. That's a huge bonus. But also, I know how to learn languages. I know what kind of learner I am. And usually for me, in the beginning stages, I really need a lot of structure. I don't want people to, I don't like it when they ask me to go and talk to people and all this stuff because I'm not ready. I need to write the character 100 times. I like that. Gives me security. I feel certainty. I gain confidence. I learn the texture by using my fingers in a certain way. And yeah, that like I get my handwriting starts to come through. So I love that. And then once I get up to the intermediate stage, I want my teachers to kick me out of the classroom and get out there and talk because I don't want to sit there just like learning rules and stuff. I want to get out there and talk. And I want to use what I know. And then by the time I get to my advanced stage, I need a lot of like push to help me articulate my ideas because intermediate, you can say sentence structures, doesn't mean you're able to really articulate yourself about things that really matter to you. So, you start to become a good learner of language. So you learn a new thing, you apply those skills. That's why, how can we say this? Like thinking about, oh, your English brain is here and your German brain is there. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. It has to be that all of these things are like they're like activating, when I need it, when I'm desperate. If I'm in Japan and I need to have a fight with the taxi driver or something, I mean, I got to use everything at my disposal. I can't be sitting there going, oh, let me look at my dictionary and I'll just ask AI, and it's not going to work like that. So, It did surprise me that the grammatical competence was actually quite high, and in Japanese and Chinese, and that's really because I learned them formally. And Korean it's at home, so I obviously it's like I think you've described this before with Vietnamese as something like more interactional, transactional, but in the home. Yeah, it's interaction transactional, but I don't even know if I were to go out to some, I don't know, place in Korea, even if it's just casual, I'm not sure that I can still activate my interactional, conversational thing because it probably wouldn't be appropriate. And English, I haven't learned the grammar. In my generation, we did learn a bit, but still all that traditional stuff. And then if you're fluent, then you don't really care about that. So that's why here, first language and versus second language acquisition are different processes. And it shouldn't just be thought that they're the same. The second language learners can learn explicitly and sometimes exceed first language in specific domains. Okay? And that's just, I just given you a little history of why that is so. So English, I didn't pay much attention to grammar because you're already fluent. That's very common for native speakers. I mean, that would be the same for, Chinese speakers or Japanese speakers, whoever. And Korean is only used informally at home, so I never formally studied. Very limited grammar, but I know how to use it in everyday family context. So here where we talk about communicative competence, which isn't just about grammar, what does it include? It includes the sociolinguistic, discourse, strategic, all these different competencies. And one can have sociolinguistic competence, so, the ability to use appropriate language, but, without having strong grammar, right? So, we see this all the time, like somebody could be in Australia 50 years. They know how things work here and you can do things, but I may not be able to string a sentence together in any accurate way. Okay. but I know enough about the sentence and the things, the rituals, the things to do in order to get by. There's a lot of people like that, and that's because they are competent in lots of different ways to communicate.
Yeah,
right?
that's so interesting. Often I'm just thinking now about like when my mum was still alive, I often wondered like, how did she negotiate like getting a refund at like Audi when her English was like very poor, but she would know what to do like in those instances, you know, grab the box, line up, present the receipt, find the right person, ask for the manager or whoever.
There you go.
Like, yeah.
So there's that sociolinguistic, but also pragmatic, like how to use this language, right? Like what to do with it. So all of these things matter. And just thinking that like, you know, linguistic competence matters, you know, is not correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the communicative competence. And Chinese and Japanese I studied explicitly, and I went to school. That's a very different thing. So, you know, there's a deliberate grammar study. And I guess this is where, like, you can also tell me if it resonates with you in terms of your own story.
Yeah, I think a lot of familiarity with like English grammatical competence, just because going through the Australian education system, I was never taught grammar explicitly. And it was really only in my undergrad when I did a subject on grammar that I absolutely hated because it was fully like traditionalist. But even that approach, I started to gain some understanding of like grammar, different parts of speech, etc. But then it was really in uni that I was like, oh, crud, I'm going to be a TESOL teacher. Like I better know this stuff now that I really got exposed to it. And even like now when we're still in this space, that's my touch point with grammatical competency in English. I can't say the same for my Vietnamese though. Like my grammatical competency, I would say that when I was studying at Vietnamese language school, I did from like prep up to year 7 of Saturday school intensives, and I was able to learn like all the sounds and how to read and how to write and string sentences together. But the minute that I stopped going to Vietnamese school, it was around year 7. It was really hard to like still maintain that degree of competency. So I found myself like slowly relying upon Google Translate to help me like write a coherent sentence and to put words together rather than to just trust my own instinct that, oh, this was the grammatically correct way to write.
Okay, so let's talk about some variables because you said, we said earlier that when you move, and context really matters, right? Because if you don't have the people around you, don't have the opportunity.
Yeah.
So what you're saying now also is, it makes me think another thing here is the need. So you used to be able to write sentences, but who are you going to need to write sentences to at that age?
Yeah. And so pretty much the only people that I wrote sentences to were to my parents who did shift work. And I would write on these like serviette napkins saying, hi, Dad, can you leave me like $5? But I would write it in Vietnamese and then expect that money would be on the counter the next day. But that was mainly like who I would write to. Like there was no other usage for Vietnamese. And aside from like conversations and, you know, as you said earlier, the conversation with elders and with grandparents, I was very limited to just like, what's the weather like? How's your garden?
Did you eat?
Yeah, that's it. And then it's like, okay, I don't know anymore. I'm just going to pass the phone back to mum now.
Yeah.
But
that's right.
Yeah. So that the degree of grammatical competency, I would say, like significantly was impacted by dropping out of Vietnamese school. And discourse competence, like over time, like I feel like that's increased, particularly in English, as I've worked with you, collaborated with you as well, being exposed to different genres of writing. That has had a huge and profound, I guess, influence upon my ability to write.
But that is language learning too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
Like for you to go through every single like paragraph that I write, to leave comments, and for me to be thinking about, oh, is this what I really want to say? How is it connected? And then to move from a publication to a poster presentation to a talk to a podcast. Like all of that is building up my discourse competency.
And that is another language.
Yeah.
Honestly, learning academic language is another language.
It's been a wild ride. And then, I would say that that's very limited in Vietnamese. But also, being able to use language appropriately in different social contexts. Like Vietnamese was always in a conversational kind of context. And I had no strategic competency in Vietnamese whatsoever. Like, tried to negotiate. Actually, when I went to Vietnam for the first time last year, and a lot of people are shocked because they're like, I can't believe that you're like almost 30 and you've never been to Vietnam until like, last year. And you've been raised by Vietnamese parents and you've been, you know how to speak conversational Vietnamese, but you've never been to Vietnam. And so like, I thought, okay, well, I should go. So I went. And I realized that my Vietnamese, like, I have no strategic competency in the north. Like, that's just not the dialect that I can speak nor understand. So it's completely, like, have no competency there. But when I went to the southern part of Vietnam, even, like, small things, like trying to, like, order something, I would struggle. I'm like, this is scary. I remember one time the guy was like, oh, do you want this to go or have here? And I was like, oh, I said something. And he was like, he had to repeat it in English. And I'm like, I'm Vietnamese. Like, I should be able to understand you. But I couldn't negotiate that breakdown of meaning. So, that really taught me a lot about my strategic competence.
Did that make you feel bad? Like,
I think so.
Shameful?
In a sense, because I'm like, how can I navigate my way through Korea just fine? But even in a country where I'm expected to know my home language, I can't even order a cup of coffee. I think that's when I really realized, oh, okay, like you have other kinds of competencies, Kat. It's okay.
Well, that's definitely true. As you were speaking, I was just thinking about what I said to you, like my Korean helped my Japanese. I guess for you, English and Vietnamese, they don't help each other
at all.
Yeah. I for a little while, because like my whole universe seems like Vietnamese background people is like all over me, like, in terms of my
connections.
Yeah. And I tried to learn a little bit through Duolingo and I was doing so well with the words. And I was like, this is good. I can do this. And then once it became sentences, no. I'm like, but that doesn't make sense. Like, why? How come? And of course, Duolingo doesn't teach you that kind of thing. So you kind of have to like make it out yourself. And then because I am actually quite good at making out those things, I'm like, oh, I kind of get that. Yeah, okay. I know how that one has to go together, but then it's getting longer and longer. I'm like, no, and I have to like I have to make it really slow speed. I have to listen to it again and again. After a while, you think, I've got no resources to help me with this. Like a lot of the sounds too are like, I speak 4 languages and I can't find the sounds of from any one of these languages to help me.
That is so true, though, because it's such a tonal language, so it's very hard.
It is hard, and so I really do understand, like if there isn't a massive need, in your everyday life, it's going to be difficult because you're not going to have any place to use it, right? And that's the same with any language. But also, there was a Vietnamese parents who I used to work with in my research projects, and they were saying how like Korean, like young children, Korean, they think, it's a cool language now, right? But there isn't anything cool to associate with Vietnamese. So the status of the language too, it's like, kids thinking, well, what am I going to use that for and where, right? So it's a complicated thing about the acquisition because all of those things become variables. But yes, we can establish that, like for me, I could use that multilingualism as a resource. Maybe you're not able to use that as a resource with Vietnamese in terms of the linguistic, grammatical aspects. But the fact that because it's more than grammar, the other things that you have in English may be helping you to figure things out in Vietnamese. So you may not have all the right strategic, things that they do in Vietnam or Vietnamese people do in Vietnam, but you have something that you are able to still lean on and oh, well, this is in this scenario, it would be appropriate to blah, blah, blah. So where you need to not speak, where you think a silence is better or whatever, like that's all stuff coming from your knowledge in your first language or both languages, because I'm sure you spoke Vietnamese at home with your parents. So that's how we think about multilingualism as a resource. It's not just one thing, it's multiple things. And I think May French talked about that very well. And all the languages, as I said, it's not compartmentalized and isolated like here and there. They're all working together, So voice and identity, this is the part like we've been talking about a lot. We tend to always end up at the end point there because still, for me, at the end of the day, it is about how I develop my voice through all these languages. I've done all the performative thing. I've learned the rituals. Yeah, but in the end, it's like, who am I in all of that? Am I just that thing? Oh, when I'm in Korea, I just do that thing and that's me. I don't just go to Korea and do all that. I do things still in my own way. And I think this is really important to understand about like, oh, are you now in your English self? Or are you now in your Chinese self? It's like, what does that mean? Like, maybe for some people that's more stark, like it's more prominent because they're shifting in and out of those worlds. But if you added another component to that, and you had like suddenly a whole access to Japanese people and your boyfriend was Japanese, whatever it was, and you have to like now triangulate or do all kinds of things, and then add another community, that it becomes, you no longer can think about these things as, oh, my English self.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So, and this is the thing, I think like multilinguals who are bilingual or maybe have just been doing a lot of code switching, maybe they don't understand, that I am a certain kind of bilingual. I am a certain kind of code switcher. And you don't understand that there are other multilingual people who do that too and more. And so you don't know what that means for them either. So making these binaries, again, mono and multi, I still think this is not doing the work that we are talking about here, which it seems to be quite complicated. We're talking about context moving. We're talking about people moving away together. We're talking about needs. We're talking about language structures, like desires. It's so complex. How are you going to say, I am a speaker of this or not?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, sometimes people ask me that question. I have to, like, my first thing is like, do I say yes or no? Oh, just for the sake of getting through this conversation, let's say yes, But in my mind, I'm always thinking, what's that mean?
Yeah.
What is that? I speak English and I can do a lot of things in English, but there's a lot of things I can't do. And, at least I have high enough competence in lots of things that now if I use AI, I can use it like to the max. I'm leveraging everything, right? But then I think, oh, will my muscles all like, die and I won't be able to even do the thing that I used to be able to do. Like there's, we're all struggling with it no matter what. Nothing to do with your native or non-native, right? So this is where I think in relation to this voice and identity stuff, competency isn't just about accuracy, and it's who you become in a language. And if I'm being judged with my Korean against native speaker norms, yes, it definitely looks deficient, but I like using it to show who I am. So it has a strategic value, and if people shun that, then that's a form of, I guess this is where the term symbolic violence comes in, because we think about violence only as in the physical, but what you say can really cut and hurt others.
Yeah.
And that way in which we position people or judge people make us feel like, you're deficient. I mean, one of the key things that were told to me all throughout my life was like, the minute I say Korean American, okay, we're going back to labels here, but that hyphen, and in Korean we say 재미교포. Like, what minute you say that, you already told you're not a real Korean. Okay? And like when you're a kid, that really cuts. Like, oh, I'm not real. Like, well, like, of course now I would say, well, what am I if I'm not real? Whoa. But when you're a kid, you don't know that, and you don't know to think any differently, other than the fact that I'm not carrying out the dominant norm. There's something other about me. And then there are like terms like, when I was doing my PhD, I started to understand all these like terms to position people. And it's like people who don't speak, this language that well or that language that well because they've been moving around a lot, like semi-linguals, they're called. I'm like, oh, that's such a bad term too, right? Like, the fact that first of all, nobody speaks a whole language. So, that's 100%. But yeah, you kind of, people telling you, oh, you suck in English, you suck in Vietnamese, like you just think, yeah, there's something wrong with me, right? At the end of the day. So all of those also like orders of indexicality, right? Like you say something and then there's like some sort of belief about that, and then it becomes normal. Oh yeah, that's bad, like you're not good. And all that is bad. So don't, like when you have a child, don't, make sure they speak one language and all this stuff. So this is why I really wanted to unpack this a bit, just to show the complexities of learning a language, this idea of acquiring a language, and what that means in terms of competence. Like, is competence even the right word to be using for this? Because competence, to me, it suggests that there is some kind of like mastery, like some point where you're complete. And the thing is, a language, you're not complete. Till my dying day, there will be so much I don't know and can't do and can do and whatever. So I don't know, but in our field, many, many years ago, I think I read it from Henry Whittleson's work. Like, he talked about how, like, probably competence is not the right way to think about it, and maybe thinking about capabilities is a better way to think about that. So it may be that I need to change this trajectory grid to thinking about that, but it was really made to challenge our ideas around competence. Like, what do we mean by that? I'm sure it must have been hard for you to also map, like, do I say this is a 2 or 3?
100%. Right? Yeah, out of a 7-point scale.
Yeah.
Yes.
So these are all just indicators for us to start having this conversation. That's what I think is important. The criticality of this. Like, we do it and we're like, but what does that even mean? We're not trying to sell the bar, graph. We're just trying to have this conversation, like open up the complexities of that. Why are these terms not very helpful and not very productive, and how we're going to think differently about it? Maybe capability is not the right word either, and somebody else is going to come and say, no, that's a bad word too.
You'll never know.
You never know.